I wanted to take a sociological lens to the world of correctional studies and criminology. And there wasn't a lot of overlap. And I was like, well, I know there's overlap. So let me design a curriculum that understood that.
So welcome to You Are a Lawyer, Bianca Van Heydoorn. How are you today?
I am great. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm really excited for today. So, Bianca, I am really excited to speak to you today because you are not a lawyer, and I do like to speak to non-lawyers. Well, in the community, we like to call them civilians because you're based in Philadelphia. I'm in Ohio, and the United States is a very litigious country. People like to sue. People like to talk about being sued. People like to watch TV about people in jail and being sued. And so I thought it was really important to have you on the show because, Bianca, you are the executive director of YSRP. Can you tell the audience a little bit about what YSRP is?
Sure. So YSRP stands for the Youth Sentencing and Reentry Project. We are a nonprofit based in Philadelphia, and we work with young people. We have two kind of primary groups of client partners, as we call them. And the first group of client partners are young people, folks under 18 who are facing charges in adult criminal court. And we work with them and their legal teams and their families and support networks to try and get their case moved out of adult court. We recognize that children are children, and we want the legal system to do a better job of recognizing that. And the second group of folks that are our client partners and a part of our communities are adults who were sentenced to die in prison when they were children, so-called juvenile lifers. And those two communities of folks really get at the core of our work, which is wanting young people to live lives with dignity, free from racist carceral systems.
Yeah. And how did you find out about YSRP? Like, what was your first introduction to the organization?
Yeah, so I moved to Philadelphia in 2018 from New York City, and I was running Philadelphia's Office of Reentry Partnerships out of the mayor's office. And as a part of that work, we were the host for Philadelphia's Reentry Coalition, and YSRP was a part of the Reentry Coalition. And so I came to know the co-founders of YSRP, Joanna Visser-Joyan and Lauren Fine, as a part of that coalition. Immediately became a fangirl of both co-founders and of the organization because they were working at the intersection of young people and the adult system, which is so not usually what people do. Either folks are completely steeped in the juvenile justice system or completely steeped in the adult legal system. So there's this sliver of folks who are young who get caught in the middle. And not only did they create an organization that worked at that intersection where that lane is really narrow, but also was an organization that believed in positive youth development, kind of used adolescent brain science to drive the work that they were doing. And although they were lawyers, were looking for untraditional ways or non-traditional ways to do lawyering, right? And to do holistic legal advocacy. So I was a huge fangirl, and they really helped me get my sea legs in Philadelphia, understand the landscape, and just stayed a fan of the organization.
Yeah, the rest is history, as they say.
That part.
Yeah. Okay, so when did you become executive director?
Became interim executive director in February of 2022. Lauren and Joanna, in partnership with the team at YSRP, went through a strategic planning process where they decided that YSRP needed one leader as opposed to two, and that leader should be more proximate to the young people that they serve. And so from a position of strength and from a position of like deep values alignment, Lauren and Joanna decided to step down and make room for new leadership. And I jumped at the chance to be a part of this organization and really wanted to kind of step in that interim role and help YSRP find its next leader that, in my biggest dreams, was someone who had the experience of incarceration. I have not had the experience of incarceration. I am a daughter, a loved one, a friend, a whatever. You can't really swing a cat in my social network without hitting someone who's had the experience of incarceration. So, in that regard, I am more proximate. But all of our hopes and dreams are that this seat is filled by someone who is formerly incarcerated. So I came on as interim in February of 2022 and then was like, how could I leave? I love this place. There's more to do. Let's set this runway up for someone even more proximate than me. And so that's my goal at this moment, is to make sure that YSRP has the foundation it needs and the structure that it needs to continue the legacy that Lauren and Joanna started by just continuing to find a more proximate leader.
Yeah. I love that. I love that you were working in the mayor's office and dealing with reentry, because I had never heard of that term. And I'm almost embarrassed to say that because I went to 3 years of law school and then I worked in law firms. But I had a brief internship in criminal law in Louisiana, enough to know that we couldn't do death penalty cases for your first 5 years because those are so important. They don't want a new lawyer doing those. Right. But I didn't realize that there was this whole thing when it comes to reentry back into society and how to get acclimated to living. And so when I found out about YSRP, I was like, okay, I only do podcasting, but how can I help? Because I was like, why don't people know about this? I don't understand. Because my husband's not a lawyer. I'm sure he doesn't know, right? Mm-hmm. And so I was like, I'm a lawyer and I don't know. I've been a lawyer for 10 years and I didn't know. And so I love that you decided to advocate and you were like, okay, however I can help out, I'm going to help out. And also your awareness that you are setting the stage for the next person who's actually had that experience, because they'll bring a whole nother level of knowledge to the role, right? But I do want to talk a little bit about your education, because you studied criminal sociology, mm-hmm. which I think is fascinating. Where did that interest come from?
Yeah, I'm a kid of New York City in the 80s and the 90s, right? And as I started coming of age, a lot of my friends and family members were being incarcerated. I, as I mentioned before, have not had the experience of incarceration. And I often say, not for lack of effort, right? Like many of our client partners, I made decisions in my childhood that could have very easily led to me being incarcerated. And I have had the benefit of time and some really amazing resourced adults in my life to help make it more likely that I didn't have the experience of incarceration. And I often credit a really good friend of mine who was incarcerated when I was 16 and he was 18. And we stayed in touch the whole time that he was incarcerated. So for almost 2 decades, I regularly wrote and visited and got a glimpse inside of his experience of incarceration. And it was kind of at the same time all these social movements were happening, right? This movement to decarcerate and starting to have the language of, you know, a prison industrial complex as an offshoot of the civil rights movement and other kind of movements for liberation. And so I came to understand what I call hyper incarceration, what other people call mass incarceration, as the social justice issue of our time. And when I went to undergrad, I was like, I really want to be a sociologist, but there's all this jail stuff happening. And I really started to get interested in how people created community and how people created societies inside of correctional settings, right? That popular notions would have us believe that people inside just are behind some closed wall, they're disappeared there, and that nothing creative, nothing human is happening behind those walls. And what I understood, right, through my friend's incarceration, through my father's incarceration, was that there were social mores and networks and lives being built behind there. And I was incredibly curious about that. And so the City University of New York offered a program where you could design your own degree and kind of get the best of each college within the university system. And I was like, oh, yeah, I'm going to do that because I wanted to take a sociological lens to the world of correctional studies and criminology. And the coursework that was offered in each of those disciplines, there wasn't a lot of overlap. And I was like, well, I know there's overlap. So let me design a curriculum that understood that.
Okay. So I have to ask a dumb question. Sociology is the study of people?
It's yes, it's the study of how people make place, how people make
Okay.
cultures, those kinds of things. Yeah.
Okay, because I was like, I know anthropology is the study of people. One of them is like the study of behavior in people. Okay. So I love that. You were like, I'll create it. I'll create the thing that doesn't exist. So I feel like, I wonder if you have like a template and now they're like, does anyone else want to study criminal sociology? You know, we have a course load here. I think that's fascinating.
Yeah.
YSRP as an organization has existed for its 11th year now.
Yep.
In 2026. So did that exist when you were in college or no?
It didn't.
Okay.
It didn't. I, look like I'm 12, but yeah, so this is, really, really early 2000s. So YSRP did not exist. And I was actually working on Rikers Island at the time. So that also helped me understand place, right? And me understand how people moved in that place and the humanity that existed in that place, despite the fact that, correctional settings, one of the functions that they play is to, remove people's humanity. And the hubris of a 20 something is like, if it don't exist, I'll create it, right? So I thank my 20 something year old self for having that chutzpah. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's awesome because you were like setting the stage for that. And then you learn about YSRP and you're like, oh, easy. I've already been studying this on my own. Now I can study it as a career. Of course.
Yeah.
I love that. Okay, very cool. So after that, you then went on to study criminal justice. And now you're working as the interim executive director. And so I was reading your biography and I was like, oh, wow, she oversees operations and finance and policy. If you have one, what is your favorite part of your day working as interim executive director?
My colleagues, right? My colleagues are the best part of my day, in part because, we're a team of folks who really care, right? I spent a lot of time, I've done almost every job that exists at YSRP at some other point in my 25-year career. And this one is the most isolating, right? Where I don't have direct communication and interaction with our client partners regularly. So that's something I have to like work at to be able to, kind of really touch the heart of our work. I'm in spreadsheets more than I am in anything else. And so really getting to connect with my colleagues and hear their experiences. Yeah, just like being with other people who care as much as I do about young people getting to adulthood, which when you're Black and brown and already connected to systems of surveillance and oppression and whatever, it's not a given that you'll make it to adulthood. And so that I get to be in partnership and community, striving and working with folks who give as much of a damn as I do every single day. That's my favorite part, right? And that we try to bring as much passion to advocating for a young person in court as we do to building our 2026 budget, right? To make sure that we're sustained enough to continue the work.
Yeah, because you need both of them, right? You need the operations and the administrative side, and you also need the colleagues and support. And so, Bianca, do you work with formerly incarcerated people as well, or anyone that's on parole that may have been a juvenile lifer?
Yeah, there's several folks on our team who are so-called former juvenile lifers. And that's really important to us from a values place, that we have folks who have never had an experience of incarceration, that we have people who have spent decades inside of carceral settings, particularly as children. That's a unique perspective that unfortunately people have. And it's invaluable on our team to just have multiple people who've had that experience for which we can do gut checks, right? If we're planning a new project or we're thinking about taking a certain direction, at the bottom of our agenda for all our leadership team meetings is like, what other perspectives are we missing here, right? We are always asking ourselves that question. It's not just my experience of 25 years doing reentry and youth development work and policy work. It's not just, my colleague Sharif's experience of being incarcerated that is valuable. Like, all of those things have to go into the pot for us to be able to, effectively steward this organization.
Yeah. And I can imagine it's quite motivating as well. You're like, okay, we're working on this because there are currently people that are experiencing this, and I'm working with people who had that experience and are living a full life outside of being incarcerated. So it's kind of like full circle. Like, this is what I'm working towards. They're not going to be that person exactly, but I know we can give them a chance. We can give them a chance. All of my work is valuable.
That's right. One of the tragedies that many of the young people that we partnering with experience is a lack of diversity in a network, right? Each of us want to be an example to a young person of like what's possible, right? I could tell a young person stories about the things that I've done that could have led me to the same fate that they're experiencing and navigating right now. And, they may not believe that because I'm sitting here as executive director, right? So I want to be a model for them that how we start, it doesn't necessarily dictate how we finish, right? And my colleague John Pace, who born and raised in Philly and spent, somewhere around 30 years of his life incarcerated, also gets to be that example of how we start doesn't necessarily need to dictate how we end. And John Lopez, who you're going to talk to, also gets to say, oh, yeah, I'm walking around in like Marvel Spider-Man expensive dunk sneakers, but yes, I'm an attorney and attorneys look like this too, right? And so each of us in our own ways really get to model for our client partners the myriad of possibilities when you have consistent, resourced adults around you and when you have really good legal representation.
Yeah. I love that. And a point that you kept saying over and over again was that you are reminding people of the humanity of the people that are living there and of these juvenile lifers, right? Even if you do have a life sentence, which we didn't even get to that part in the Montgomery versus Louisiana case, but even if there is a life sentence, that isn't the end.
That's right.
Please keep knowing there's always going to be tomorrow. There's going to be later on today. That's not the end, right? And there are people out there that are fighting for you and working hard for you. Some at YSRP. I'm sure there are other organizations as well. And so, Bianca, I always ask every guest, what would you say to a young person or a college student about what they could do to advocate and to make the world look a little bit better in a couple of years?
Yeah, I'd say get proximate. Understand what is happening in the lives of young people from them, right? Not from what we see on the news. Get proximate to legal professionals who are advocating for a more just world. Get proximate and learn from organizations that are supporting the community, and understand what your talents and your gifts are and offer them regularly, frequently. There's a YouTuber that I listen to that says, like, you can't do all the things that the world needs, but the world needs all the things you can do. And that would be my advice, right? I'm sitting in a city right now where a young person right now today, a young person as young as 10 years old can be charged, prosecuted, and incarcerated as if they're an adult. And that is counter to the Miller decision, to what we would have just celebrated, the Montgomery v. Alabama decision that allowed so many people around the country to get resentenced and come home, right? And in Philadelphia and in Pennsylvania, that's particularly important because this state and this city sentenced more children to die in prison than any other place on the planet. So I would say understand, right? You earlier mentioned that the term reentry wasn't a part of your vocabulary until recently. And I think most people in the city of Philadelphia and in the state of Pennsylvania don't know that a child as young as 10 years old can be charged as an adult. And many people don't know what that means. They don't know that it means that you don't have a right to have your parent there when you're being questioned, that you go through the system, the same way that someone 4 times your age would go through the system, and you're expected to be an active participant in your own defense. And in what way is that fair and reasonable and in service of justice and public safety? We don't believe it is. And so we try to fill that gap and step into that gap to mitigate the harm that comes when we make unjust decisions like that.
Yeah, I know plenty of adults who are intimidated by even going to court for the smallest things that are misdemeanors, not even guaranteed to have a prison sentence. So I couldn't even imagine 10 years old. I mean, my brain is literally like, because you're like, what are you talking about? What?
That's right. Many of the young people that we're working with, by the nature of their charges, right, are facing jail time often that's longer than they've been alive, right? And at that point, we know from adolescent brain development that, until you're in your mid-20s, impulse control is a thing, right? Being able to foresee the, future consequences. Those are features of adolescence, and everything about participating in your own criminal defense requires those skills, right? So.
Yeah. Okay. So Bianca, my one last thing, how can we help? What does YSRP need? Do you need interns? Do you need donations? What do you need?
We need all the things. We need donations. Go to ysrp.org, and there's a donation button right in the upper right-hand corner, I believe. So no donation is too small. We are in a moment where resources are really, really scarce and need is really, really big. We need people to reach out to their elected officials and understand their stance on young people being prosecuted as adults. And we need to push and advocate for that practice to stop in Pennsylvania. For folks outside of Pennsylvania, inquire with your elected official what the rules are. And we need folks to stay engaged in all aspects of civic society. And an easy thing, love on the young people you know, right? Love on the young people you know, and be a resource yourself for somebody close to you.
Thank you so much. Everyone, thank you so much for listening. Please stay engaged, even if you have to start a conversation. Hey, I just heard this podcast. Did you know a 10-year-old could do this? Easy intro for you guys to start talking, okay? So thank you so much, Bianca. I really appreciate it.
Of course.